Peace and blessings to you, family. I just was unpacking some shit. So I would like to share a little bit about what I'm unpacking, what I'm reflecting on, and talk about healing, because that's what I'm all about. Just had a really rainy afternoon and the sun is back out. So I'm here today to discuss and to share about the mother wound, about sexual abuse and sexual trauma, and transparent communication. So trigger warning, I will be discussing a little bit around sexual trauma. I won't go into any gruesome details or anything. So just bear with me, take a breath if you need, pause the video if you need to. I'm not in this moment feeling so emotional, but I may get emotional as I share. So that's safe here. It's a safe space for you to feel your feelings. So I always had a difficult relationship with my mom. I won't say always, but from the time that I hit puberty through even now, sometimes it's a challenging relationship, but it is better. But especially my teenhood, me and my mom were not getting along. We were not friends. We were very mean to each other, and I hated her, or at least I believed that I hated her. For years, for many, many, many years, I really despised my mom. I held a lot of resentment because of ways that she did things, ways that she treated me that I didn't agree with. And in general, just how she was showing up, even though she was always in my life and she was always supporting me, financially, I always physically had a place. I didn't really feel safe with my mom. I always preferred being at my dad's house or being at a friend's house. And I always felt like one day I would just never talk to my mom again, because it really got that bad. And I made it known. I ain't scared. I let her know that I didn't like her. Like I said, I was really mean, and certainly she was mean back. She said she didn't like me either. She said she didn't want to ever talk to me again plenty of times. So many times we went through this thing where she would tell me she never wants to talk to me or see me again, but then we'd be back like it never happened. And one thing for me that was not resonating was she never really apologized when those things happened. We didn't really get to communicate and move through those things. We just eventually were okay, we're back in each other's life because we need each other. And we didn't really address too much what had happened. Once I got older, into college and stuff, when we had falling outs, I would apologize and let her know that I love her, because that's when I started to understand me being mean to her is not useful. It's not helpful. And she doesn't deserve that. So I can't recall in this moment times when she's apologized to me, and that's not really even a judgment. That's just the truth. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of feelings, a lot of hardships, and one of the main things that I feel made me start to really dislike my mom was that when I was in the 7th grade, or was it 8th grade? The 7th or 8th grade, I think I was around 13 years old, I revealed to my mom that I had dealt with some sexual abuse when I was younger, when I was 7. And it happened in her house. And it was really uncomfortable conversation. It was really, really, really hard to tell her, but I was going through a lot emotionally. I was having all of these bouts of depression. I had been cutting myself, and she discovered that, and she just couldn't understand. She was basically what is wrong with you? So I told her this is what I'm battling inside of myself. I feel like I'm fucked up because I had dealt with these things and I didn't know how to process them. I didn't know how to feel about anything. I didn't feel supported. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do with these feelings that I was feeling from what I had experienced. at such a young age. And I didn't really understand what happened when I was 7 until I was like 11 or 12, and they started telling us in school like what molestation was. And then I'm like, oh, that's what that was. Because before I didn't even have any reference point to understand what it was. I just knew it was a happening, and I had feelings about it, but I didn't have words to describe it. So yeah, I told my mom, and I can't remember fully what happened after I told her. I remember like we were sitting on the floor, and I remember that she was asking me questions, but then she was asking me questions about details about what happened, and I immediately shut down. I was like, I don't want to talk about anymore. I don't want to talk anymore about it. And we didn't talk anymore about it. In fact, we didn't talk. It didn't even come up again after that one conversation until a few years later when I was in the 10th grade. And one day, or maybe I was in the 9th grade. It was in high school though. It was definitely more than a year after I initially told her what happened. She, one day, like randomly, on the way to school, like I'm about to get out the car to go start my school day, she like randomly brought it up. I was like, hey, that thing that you told me about, like, do you need to see somebody? Like, do you need to see a therapist? And when I tell y'all, I was so pissed. I was pissed when she asked me that, because like I said, I was about to get out of the car to start my day. And I said something rude. I was like, I don't want to fucking talk about that with you ever again. And I got out the car, and so we never talked about it again to this day. And I'm not blaming anybody, because certainly I wasn't open to talking about it, so my mom just respected that. But inside, I felt like, yeah, I do need to see a therapist. Yeah, I do need help. I needed help when I first told you. That's why I told you. And I felt like she should have just known what to do. And so I hated her for that. I hated her for that. And that was a big part of the anger that I held towards my mom, just to give some background. And she did a lot of things to keep us safe, so of course, I'm sure from her perspective, it was probably really devastating to hear that this kind of thing happened in her own house, because she used to literally not even let us go anywhere because she was so worried about things happening. But it's like it ends up happening, right under your nose. So yeah, I'm sure like on her end, I don't know, because we still haven't talked about it. I'm sure like other things were happening, like maybe she was trying to process what it was, or trying to find a way to help me. But because it wasn't communicated with me, I just felt like she didn't care, and I felt like I wasn't loved and I wasn't supported by the one person who I felt should be supporting me the most, who's my mom. So that is my mother wound. And so yeah, like I said, lots of challenges throughout our relationship. Otherwise, just like the way she reacts to things would always trigger me, and then I would be mean to her, then she would be mean to me, and then we were very back and forth with that. When I got to college is when I started to heal that part of myself, because I started to learn about the law of attraction. I read The Secret, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm attracting these things that are happening to me. And I started to, through learning about that, I stopped blaming others for what I was going through. So I stopped blaming my mom for my depression. I started to see, oh, like I'm depressed because I keep living in these negative thought patterns, and I keep putting myself in these situations that mimic the abuse that I once was enduring. And I just, in general, that's when my healing journey really started. My connection to my spirituality really started. So in that, I started to, be nicer to my mom, because I was like, okay, like if I'm better to her, then she'll be better to me. And certainly we still had challenges, but I did start to see some improvement. And the day that I really started to understand, like unlock a lot of things around my relationship with my mother, and also the way my mother was this one day that I went to the doctor when I was in college. A little backstory before I share this is that my mom has always been I considered her to be conservative, but really it's just she's really uncomfortable with sexuality and the body. She never ever wanted to talk. She never taught me about my period. I learned about it in school. And it obviously made her really uncomfortable when I would talk to her about stuff like that. Like, she was always like, I don't want to hear about that, Deja. Like, I don't want to hear it. She didn't even like me hearing, like, if I was like, I need to buy some underwear, some panties, she hated to hear that. Like, she didn't even want to talk about underwear with me. So I always thought that she was just really weird and conservative. And she always was saying, like, yeah, like, don't have sex. Not really even always saying, but if she ever said anything related to it, she was just like, just don't do it. Like, she was very like, just not, something just bit me. Yeah, she was just not talking about those types of things. And so I went to the doctor. I had a UTI, but I went to get like an STD test because I didn't know. Like, I really didn't know anything about my body either because my mom didn't teach me. And I mean, they teach you a little bit of stuff in health class, but I didn't really remember that stuff. I took like one health class in high school and one in middle school, and then I was in college. And I didn't really know much about my body. I didn't know that much about menstruation. I just didn't know that much. So I went, and my doctor was a black woman. And she, and I feel like it was useful for me, beneficial, because my mom is a black woman. I'm a black woman. So it was a nice reflection to have like a black woman who's around the age of my mother who is assisting me in this moment. And it turned out I only had a UTI. But she was talking to me, of course, about sexual health and these things, and she was telling me things I just didn't know about. And she was like, so did your mom ever teach you these things? And I expressed to her, like, no, my mom, she really doesn't like to talk about anything around me. And I told her, like, my mom is so conservative. She doesn't even want to talk about underwear. And the woman actually got really quiet and really serious. Like, the room, there was a chill. And she said, was your mom ever sexually abused? And in that moment, like, I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, and I could feel myself feeling like inside I felt like a yes. But I still, to this day, I don't know if that is the case. But I was like, you know, she's never told me that, but that would make sense. And she was like, yeah, a lot of people who have dealt with sexual abuse, they're really uncomfortable talking about the body, talking about the vagina, even when it comes to close family members, like her own daughter, and I'm her only daughter. And yeah, that really kind of broke me down, broke me open, I'll say. It really broke me open. In the moment, I just took it in. I'm so grateful for that woman to this day. But later, I cried for my mother, and I felt like, oh my God, all this time I've been like blaming her for my trauma and my pain, and I've never once considered that she has trauma and she has pain. And I was like, that makes so much sense, that my mom probably was sexually abused, and so when I was sexually abused, who knows what all it put her through, but it was probably too triggering, and she probably fell into this place of not knowing what to do, in the same way she probably didn't know what to do when she endured it. And again, like, I'm not saying that definitely happened to my mom, because to this day we've not talked about it, but I feel it. I feel it in my womb. I feel it in my womb. And as I've done this healing work and this womb connection, I felt like, you know, I'm connected innately to the womb that I came out of. I'm connected to my mother and her mother and her mother. And whatever they endured, I have that in my DNA. And I used to like have dreams of like sexual abuse that didn't happen to me like in this body, in this lifetime, but dreams and visions and feelings of like, I had a lot of feelings around sexual abuse. And I thought it was because of my own experience, but these dreams were quite different from my experience. My experience, I feel like, was a bit unique. But I always felt that. I always felt sexual trauma. And some of it wasn't even my own. So I started to understand, like, oh my God, it's in my lineage. It's in my maternal lineage. And it helped me to have compassion for my mother. It helped me to stop blaming her and to start seeing her for like the wounded inner child that she is. And I know a lot of the things I don't like about my mom and the things that trigger me about her come from her wounds, come from her pain. They always come from a place of pain. Like when she's super angry and super like reactive with us, and even violent at times. I understand, like, this is what she went through as a child. This is all she knows. These are her patterns from years of living under whatever circumstances she lived under. It was also a red flag that she never talks about her childhood. She'll talk to me a little bit about being in college, and I don't even think she's ever talked to me about high school. So I don't know anything about my mother's childhood. Not once has she just told me a story about something she used to do or anything. She never talks about it. So I understand that that must mean there are things there that she doesn't want to face. She doesn't want to express. And as I came to that realization, I found so much. It broke me open and allowed for me to have, like, feel in my heart space that compassion for my mother. So I'm gonna go deeper into this writing, and I'm gonna share it at some point. But I'm sharing all this just to say, like, it's so important to not fear that communication, because my mom really, she doesn't have to be afraid. She can talk to me about these things. Still to this day, I mean, I know we're still healing our relationship and getting to a place where we feel comfortable being vulnerable with one another. For me, after I was super vulnerable with her and then I was rejected, then I never wanted to be vulnerable with her again, because she didn't really help me when I told her about my abuse. But now I'm working towards being able to be vulnerable with her again so that we can talk about my experience and her experience without fear, because these are past experiences that we can already let go. We're safe here in the now, and that's what grounds me. Like, I can talk about what I experienced in my childhood, even though it was painful at the time. Right now, I am safe, I am loved, I am whole, I am worthy, I am deserving. And I'm able to feel like that because of the healing work that I've done for my inner child. And I want that for my mom. I want my mom to heal her inner child. I want to be able to see the vibrancy and the love of her inner child being reawakened, and knowing that it's safe for her to come out and to get this love. And I want us to be able to communicate. And if she had communicated with me sooner about whatever she had experienced, then we could have had, like, you know, a discord. We could have communicated, and then certain cycles wouldn't have been repeated. I mean, my experience, I was very young, you know. I know 7, you're probably a 7-year-old you think is so young, like that's too soon to start talking to them about sex. But actually, I feel like we could probably talk about at least safe touch and these things a lot sooner. And my mom was so not versed in that she never once communicated any of that to us. So even when I was dealing with the abuse and it's happening in the house, like, I'm not knowing what it is, so I'm not telling anybody. I don't even know what's happening. So yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to just talk about your experiences, and talk about boundaries, and talk about safety with the little ones, no matter how little. Because you never know what they're going to have to face, and they need to be well versed, so that they have that word no, and they have that, and they feel safe enough to go and talk to someone safe about it. And I didn't feel safe with my mom, so I never felt safe going and telling her something. Even when I was little, I remember, like, being afraid to tell my mom because I thought somehow I was gonna get in trouble. Because I was always in trouble. My mom was the type, like, where we're always getting in trouble. There's a lot of yelling happening. There's a lot of punishment happening. So that doesn't feel like a person I can go to when I'm experiencing something that I knew was wrong. I could feel, even at 7, like, this is wrong. Like, this doesn't feel right. And I was like, so I can't tell my mom because then she'll be mad at me and I'll be getting a whooping. But if we had a different relationship, I would have been able to go to her. And I'm not trying to change the past, certainly. I'm happy with where I am now. I'm grateful for this lesson so that when I have children, I'm able to fearlessly talk to them, communicate transparently with them, and even tell them about what happened to me, and not from a place of shame, because I'm not ashamed. I just am, you know, and I can see what happened and accept that that is a part of my past, and even forgive the person who did that, forgive myself, release any feelings of shame or guilt or resentment, and I can still live a happy life. And I think that's the thing that my mom is missing, is that because she didn't do that healing work, there might still be some shame, some guilt, some resentment, some fears around whatever has happened in her life. And that's why it's expressed through a lot of anger and a lot of, mostly anger, mostly anger and fear. And we don't have to live in that state. And especially, and I'm not even a parent yet, but as parents, we have to understand when we're dealing with especially our biological children, like what we have, especially as the woman with the womb, like what we have in our womb space, we're going to pass that on to our children. So we have to do womb healing before we bring that child into the world. And even once the child is in the world, continuing to heal ourselves and being able to communicate with this being that came through you. What I was writing about today was like, my mother was my first home. She was my first home, my first safe space. And I want her to continue to be a home and a safe space for me. But it takes that connection, it takes healing, and it takes a lot of love and compassion. So yeah, that's all. Thank you for listening. I really hope that this served some of you. I'm sure many of you will see yourselves reflected in this story. And yeah, I wish us all so much healing and so much love, so much compassion. Everything's gonna be okay.